this is Catherine Marie, and you are listening to Long COVID Real Talk podcast. Today we have a special treat. We get to see Dr. Zeest Khan. She is one of the people that I most admire, and one of the people whose podcast I first found when I first was diagnosed with long COVID. So she has been a really important part of my personal journey. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be here. And I love that I get to sit and talk with my friend. Isn't it crazy? Like, we would not have met had
Yeah.
this not happened. And, I'm really honored that you say I'm important to you, but you're also really important to me. And we bonded just over email initially. Um, when the podcast it's still not huge, but when it was really small.
Mhm.
And it was really validating for me to hear your story and for you to share what you've been going through. And we're kind of going through similar things at the same time.
Mhm. And it was especially helpful because you were the only physician that I know with long COVID, at least in my regular life. So it was really, really helpful because I felt very alone when I was first diagnosed. And, just being kind of pulled from your life that is your identity of working in medicine and something that we both really loved. And then kind of being thrown into this new life that we're still trying to navigate. It's been really nice to have a buddy that's also going through it. So,
Same. Might be the only physician with long COVID, but I'm definitely not the only physician with long COVID.
right.
And you and I both were talking about how it was a little embarrassing to admit that we were sick. And we also probably worked for a lot longer than our health would have benefited from. Like,
Hmm.
we're just sort of trained mentally to default to, I have to push through and ignore my needs. So I think it's been a really healthy exercise for me, certainly, and it sounds like for you too, to sort of detach our identities from our labels, like
Yes.
our work labels.
Yes. It's been a challenge, but as we have mentioned, we've kind of expanded our horizons in our lives because of that as a result of being ill. So I guess there is some good that comes from it, even though it has been quite the journey.
Yeah, in the Long COVID MD podcast, I got a chance to talk with a therapist who has um, disability herself and kind of specializes in caring for people with chronic illness. And she introduced me to a term called post traumatic growth, which is the sort of wisdom that you gain or the lessons that you learn after a really difficult time in your life. And I don't think that negates the suffering, but it is a method that we can use or something that we can look at to be like, okay, well, I'm learning something from this that I can integrate and I think make me hopefully a better person.
Yeah, that would be nice. A good,
I
yeah. So, so can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like as an anesthesiologist, and then how COVID changed your life?
Sure. So I am an anesthesiologist. I subspecialize in open heart and lung surgery. So I have been taking care of people in the hospital who are literally the sickest, most acutely ill people. A lot of my skills overlap with trauma skills. So I was working here in the California Central Valley in an independent practice working with several groups, community hospitals. Like, I've always been a community practice doctor as compared to an academic physician. And I work and live in an area that has limited resources, and we do really big things and really, navigate really dangerous situations with limited resources, which I think are lessons that I've carried on to my long COVID journey. Our area was hit quite hard by COVID-19. And by the middle of 2020, I was working, uh, as they say, on the front lines. And as an anesthesiologist, I spend a lot of time in patients' mouths and throats and their respiratory system. Um, and I found myself not only stressed and, worried, just like, or drained, I guess is a better phrase, just like everybody around me was at that time. But I found that my health was really deteriorating, and I was chalking it up to the stress. But by the end of 2020, it was undeniable that I was having a medical problem. I Most of my symptoms at that time were fatigue and pulmonary or respiratory issues, and I was getting to the point where I was checking off a lot of the boxes that I ask my heart failure patients and COPD patients of how well do you breathe? How difficult is it to walk up a flight of stairs? Can you sleep lying flat? And I was just answering no to most of those questions. I did my best to really push through. So I was really struggling and kept moving my target of taking quote unquote time off
Mhm.
a little farther out. And I tried my best to make it to the summer of 2021, but I couldn't. And in early 2021, after a shift at the county hospital, I walked from the hospital front door and tried to walk to my car in the parking lot, and I didn't make it. I was finding myself before I got out of the car to walk into the hospital, before I would leave the hospital to walk to my car, before I would try to get to the operating room, talking myself up to be like, okay, you can do it. Just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep walking. Because it felt like my shoes were filled with cement and I was short of breath. And so that day, I couldn't make it. The pep talk didn't work. And I just had to sit down. I leaned up against a tree on a little patch of grass and tried to find an orderly with a wheelchair because I was still pretty close to the patient drop off to help me get to my car. Called my husband, ended up making it back home, and then had to stop working. And that was the spring of 2021. I thought that I just needed some time off and I needed to sleep. And that really wasn't the case. And it became clear that I had not only fatigue and pulmonary issues, but a whole other set of symptoms that weren't making sense to me. I was lucky enough to talk with one of my friends from residency who unfortunately was able to tell me about long COVID because her sister was struggling with long COVID. And her sister did not have any medical training, but she was my source for information and was telling me her symptoms and talk about a checklist. I checked off every symptom she was telling me that she and others were dealing with after a COVID infection. I was dealing with. And after I took time off, I was ultimately diagnosed with long COVID. And I've been home ever since.
Hmm. It's crazy. Wow. Well, I would like to at some point get into also how you built your podcast. That is really awesome. But the main thing that I wanted to have you here for today is to help all of us with how to proceed through the holidays. I mean, when people listen to this, it may be December of 2024 when we recorded this, but there are holidays all year round. Every family has heavy months with extra birthdays and anniversaries and stuff like that. So um, I was wondering what you tend to do to try to alleviate the stress and the burden of the holidays so it doesn't affect your health.
I don't know about you, but what I have taken away from my medical practice is that a lot of life is arbitrary and luck of the draw. I also have taken away, like I mentioned, being in community practice. I really live in the reality that I don't have everything and that my patients don't have all the bells and whistles, but we always have what we need for the most part. And that's the approach that I take to holidays as well. I think we put a lot of emotional meaning onto rituals. And I it has benefited me to ask what did I enjoy about this ritual? What did I enjoy about this activity? I've even asked myself that a lot about my career. That is really what is really meaningful about this event? What do I really want to take from it? And I have kids, so I always ask, what do I want my kids to enjoy from this? I grew up not celebrating Christmas, and so I come from a family who we don't celebrate Christmas. So I grew up looking at the holiday like it's really extravagant. Like Christmas is really extravagant. And I don't know if it's because I my eyes have changed as I've grown up or if the cultural norms have changed, but it seems to be bigger and bigger. And I recommend just asking yourself, what is it that I enjoy, and lean into that more because it's a matter of your health. Um, and you can still enjoy your life, despite restrictions. And sometimes for me, it sort of like amplifies what have I been enjoying and what have I been um, tolerating, what have I been pushing through, and who does that benefit? So for me, uh, identifying the real value of each event, each holiday, identifying the things that I would be sad, like most upset to miss. Those two things might not align, but I think of what benefits me, what I enjoy most is spending time with my family. And I might not be able to see all of my family. How can I replicate that as best as I can with the resources that I have or the people who are safe and who can be around me? And then I just lean into that. We keep Christmas really, really simple. So we do celebrate Christmas as a sort of cultural holiday in our house. And we've kept it really, really simple. When the kids were really little, I wrapped presents that they had forgotten that they had in the garage. You know how a
Yeah.
lot of kids get so many toys and they forget about it and they can't play with everything at once. That's a lucky position to be in. But I just wrapped stuff that they already had and it was like, hooray, they've got a toy that they already had. Um, and um, I don't know. That's my general approach to the holidays. Like set limitations and extract as much value as you can given those limitations.
So what you said about Christmas just made me it was weird. It made me remember our wedding because I remember when we got married, weddings at that point were very extravagant. They were sometimes tens of thousands or, just tons of money. And I remember thinking, well, before Princess Diana's wedding, weddings were very simple. It was just, like you and your parents or whatever would go to either the church or the justice of the peace or whatever, and it was just very, very, very simple. And then it's kind of grown and grown and grown and grown to have this really, I mean, just very big wedding that kind of eclipses the people in it a lot of times because it's so much. So and I remember having to really try to wrap my head around what we wanted for our specific wedding, what we didn't want to get lost in the whole thing. And it was supposed to be something specifically for us as a couple and as a new family. And how can our family support us as we start a new family? And in a way that, just thinking about it that way, I worked so hard to have a wedding that was like that and be simple and everything. So it makes me feel like it's possible to do that with Christmas if you think about it the same way, like as you were saying. If you just think about it as your specific family, like what's important about the holiday to you, and then focusing on that and not getting lost in everything. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of us can just get lost in the holiday. Um, and and that, I mean, that is for the people that are doing okay during the holidays. There's also a lot of people that don't do well during the holidays because of the high expectations and because they're missing people in their lives that used to be there, whatever. And I used to when I was a social worker, I used to work on the suicide hotline. And during the holidays, man, it was rough. I mean, there were just so many people that were calling in. And I think that's one of the things, because there are these huge expectations of what, the Norman Rockwell Christmas looks like. So that is really interesting to me to think about what you want Christmas to be for you and your family, and to have the freedom to let go of the things that no longer serve you and that kind of don't fit with what you like, who you guys are as a family or and as a person, frankly.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Holidays, even before or without illness, for the general population, is a time of amplified stress and amplified grief.
Hmm.
Because a lot of this is because it exposes the strains on familial relationships that you wish were better
Hmm.
than they are. That I think is an something a lot of us relate to, whether or not we're ill. And it's absolutely true that, rates of depression and urgent calls for, mental health support are increased during these holidays. So I want us to show ourselves some grace, because now we have this added layer of grieving um, our new limitations when you have long COVID. It's really hard to change your expectations. It's also really hard to change your habits. And it's really, really hard to face tough realities. So, all of this is easier said than done, but it is possible. And unfortunately, it's kind of where we're at. Like, how do I make the best of what I have with what I have, while also acknowledging that I wish things were a little different?
Hmm. Definitely.
I also think, don't you think like social media has also contributed, like the Instagramification of everything,
Yeah.
weddings and Christmas and the whole thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Mm. So I was thinking, like, practically speaking, how to proceed with different things. So um, I made a mistake this year. My daughter's birthday is really close to Christmas, and I decided to put her birthday party on her birthday this year instead of earlier in December. And then we did a breakfast with Santa the following day. And then we had one of the things that we love doing as a family that came from my family of origin is going to a Christmas light show on Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Day, we have friends that because our both of our families are back east, so we have my sister is here in the area, but other than that, we mainly just hang out with friends on the holidays who are like family now. But another friend wanted us to come and visit, and they live far away. It was the whole week of Christmas just suddenly became really stressful. And I ended up realizing just in my body, I started feeling really stressed once that additional trip was added. So I tried to listen to my body, and I called them and said, "Hey, is it possible that we can come the following weekend? So we have a few days break." But in the future, I'm not going to have it all in one week. So that's one practical thing that I've learned. And secondly, I'm only doing one thing per day, and I'm trying to have days of breaks between them.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice because right now I can only do one thing per day and I need breaks. I think you're speaking to something really important, which is planning ahead, which of course is difficult for those of us with, this waxing and waning disease that can take us by surprise.
Mhm.
But especially when it comes to relationships and family dynamics, setting instead of reacting to what I have, so I'll backtrack. I have this tendency to let certain people in my life make the plans and then I work around those plans. That's the way my life was. Um, and I was hoping that they would accommodate my needs, but not from malice. They didn't. It just wasn't registering. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of us have that experience.
Yeah.
So, initially that hurt. And then my initial reaction was just to go ahead and do what I had always done and try to make it work around their schedule or what I perceived as their needs. And what works better for me is to sit with the little bit of discomfort ahead of time and think through, what do I normally do on this holiday? For us, Thanksgiving has always been that, you know, that holiday where it has quite a few expectations. What do I want to do? Um, and then I communicate, what can I do? And then I communicate that and make plans accordingly. So I have had to, over the course of these years of being sick, just say, I'm not joining you on this event. There's been quite a few events. I'm not joining you on this event. And then that's it. I'm not joining you on this event. I give pretty straightforward responses when I'm pressed. Um, but after repeating, like setting my boundaries, I know that's kind of cliche, but just saying what I am willing and not willing to do in a way that is kind and just a little detached from emotion and well in advance. And say like, no, I'm not joining you on that day. I can offer an alternative or not. By doing that ahead of time, it saves me a lot of heartache and stress when the actual day of the event comes because the work has been done ahead of time. It is again speaks to the need for processing our grief, having a really realistic conversation with yourself or someone you trust about what you can do and what is not available for you, and then making decisions accordingly. You can't control how other people are going to feel by you communicating your needs. That doesn't mean you have to be mean. It doesn't mean this has to be a big conflict. I know a lot of people are afraid of that.
Mhm.
Um, and I was surprised the world didn't end. And they got it. It clicked for them. And yeah, I think initially, I'll speak for, my mom, her feelings were hurt initially, but now it's totally different. Where I'm like, she kind of expects that this is the new norm and it's not personal. And I chat with you and meet with you at other times. Um, so I don't know. I think the planning ahead of time and also what you're doing is like reflecting on what worked for me this time. I'm not going to kick myself too much when I did more than I should have or made plans that didn't work that great. I'm not going to kick myself too much about it, but I'm definitely going to use that as a data point for planning the next event.
Mhm. Last year, I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was too much, and I had a big flare, and so did my sister the week of Christmas. So last year, we ended up having to celebrate Christmas the following week because we could not, we were not able to get out of bed, as we all know how that goes. So that is why this year I was particularly concerned that if I didn't plan better, that I was just going to have to miss the whole week and then try to plan a few things for the following week that could be scheduled to a different week.
It also just kind of speaks to the some things are arbitrary, not everything. Like some things definitely have like time restricted things, like Christmas mass only happens on one day.
Right.
Um, and so if that's important to you, it's one of those things where you either miss it or you make it. But other things are like, this is Thanksgiving is on Saturday.
Mhm.
That's okay. Christmas is on the 30th. That's all right too.
Yeah, the people that wanted us to come over for a Christmassy type meal, when I moved them to the weekend, they were sad, and I was like, "Well, last year I celebrated Christmas a week later. We can still do Christmas." So I feel more hopeful going into this holiday season, um, with the one exception of having the birthday party a little too close. I will not do that again. But other than that, I think we're looking okay. And the other thing is that I tend to, when I'm feeling good, make too many plans, and then
Oh gosh, yeah.
then I have a flare, and then I have to cancel everything. So I'm trying to restrain myself a little bit so that I don't overplan different fun activities, and just do maybe 3 things instead of 8 things over the course of the month.
It's the hardest thing for me to do is to not let Superman Zeest make plans for Pem Zeest. Like that's why I think it's so funny that there is this made up narrative that people with fatiguing illnesses are just not trying hard enough and they're just lazy. Like, we want to do everything. And when we start feeling a little bit good, we start doing everything. And it's really hard to show enough restraint in a way that is effective to keep us steadily pacing. Like pacing is never it's never going to be perfect. I don't know who does pacing really really well. I feel like all of us most of us do a little bit of push crash.
Hmm. I think we will have crashes whether or not we pace sometimes. So
Mhm.
really hard when I crash to not waste energy trying to figure out why I crashed.
Mhm.
You know, try to just save the energy and just try to get through the crash and then get out to the other side.
You know what that reminds me of? I was talking with someone before a event that I was planning to go to. I think it was a one-day medical conference. Um, and we were talking about like how am I going to do this? And so I talked out with someone. We not only talked about how to prepare ahead of time, meaning how much of my schedule do I need to clear before the event? What are the best chances for my success
Hmm.
to get through this? And then do those things. For me, it means clearing my schedule for a few days beforehand, making sure I pay extra attention to my hydration and nutrition and sleep.
Hmm.
Um, and then having some strategies to get through the event without um, falling apart on that day, having too much strain on your body during the event. So we talked about finding a bathroom. So, like, take a few minutes out, finding a quick quip, like something you can say to move out of the room, like a little excuse
Hmm.
that's really reasonable. Um, Making sure, for me, hydration is really important. A lot of people with POTS is the same. So,
Hmm.
making sure I don't forget to drink water throughout the day, eating before the event, um, and having a deadline, like I'm leaving at this time,
Hmm.
or I am leaving if I feel X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
And then allowing yourself to follow through with those instructions.
I think the leaving is really key. My husband is much better at this than I am, and the way we developed this was actually because of our little one. Because you don't want to wait until the child is spasming on the floor, having a huge tantrum before you're like, oh, it's time to leave, you know? So a lot of times he would say, okay, we're doing this is going really well. I think this is good. We should quit while we're ahead, you know, like by the time we actually get back to the car and get her buckled in and she'll be uh, tired and we probably could put her to bed when we get home. So we've used that same way of thinking um, for me because a lot of times when we are in the middle of something, I'm like, yeah, we're having so much fun and I don't feel bad at all. Because, you know, with our post exertional malaise, it's post exertion. So during the exertion, we feel great. And he's usually the one that will say, hey, I think that we've done a good job. We have had a good time, and I think we need to leave now while we're ahead. So we did that yesterday. We went to a Christmas concert and we left it halfway through, which I've never done anything like that before, but it was a really good idea because we all completely passed out as soon as I got home. So,
Yeah, because there are signals, or you can have some control over what you, how you decide to engage with something. Like,
mhm.
you don't have to eat everything on your plate. You don't have to sit through a movie you don't like. Um, and you can leave ahead of time and enjoy the part that you participate in. It doesn't have to be all or none.
Hmm. I think a lot of us have been all or none prior to becoming ill, and therefore having to learn these skills while sick is particularly difficult because our norm before this was to be the first one there and the last one to leave, and
Yep.
wanting to help with cleaning up
Yep.
or yeah.
Yep. That's so funny that you mentioned cleaning up. Like, I had to force myself to just sit down and let someone else do the dishes.
Yeah.
And I had to become okay with, I'm going to keep this person company while they do the dishes. I'm not going to be that friend who loads the dishwasher, but I'm going to sit and, I'm going to put my plate away and I'm going to sit with the person who might be doing the dishes and keep them company doing it. I don't have to do all of the labor. I
Mhm.
am offering what I can.
Right.
I am offering probably 100%, and my 100% looks different now than it did 5 years ago. But it's
Absolutely.
still 100%.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think that is a good spot to close. I hope that all of the things that we discussed resonated, and I know I'm going to be listening to this myself later at various times, but thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope you will come back again at some point.
Of
And
course.
yeah, just thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. I hope some of this was helpful. The rambling thoughts of people with long COVID, I find sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't, but typically a lot of people kind of go through similar things.
Yes, and a lot of times the ramblings of one long hauler resonate with the thoughts
Yes.
of others.
Fingers crossed.
Right. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk again real soon. Okay, take care. Bye.